Welcome to another episode of Leadership Lessons. My guest today is Kentucky State Representative Emily Callaway, and we're going to talk about equal protection for the unborn. Representative Callaway, thank you for joining Leadership Lessons.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Let me tell you about Representative Callaway. She was born in Valley Station here in the Louisville area, graduated from Pleasure Ridge Park High School, and attended both JCC and U of L. She's active in her church, Beachmont Baptist in Louisville, where she served as church treasurer and is involved in a variety of ministries from Vacation Bible School, community outreach events, to the children's choir, even sings in the worship choir. Representative Callaway was also on the Budget and Finance Committee for the Louisville Regional Baptist Association and is currently on the board of directors for a ministry called Abba's Delight. She has a wide range of job experiences, from changing oil to working on diesel engines to a substitute Spanish teacher. All that's very exciting. Representative Callaway's been married for almost 19 years and has two teenage sons. And on top of all that, she was elected to Kentucky's House of Representatives last fall. So, Representative Callaway, you've been busy, a young family, growing family, active in your church, and you've taken on this role. And so before we talk about specific legislations, tell us about you and how did you become interested in politics?
Thank you. So, when I became a mom, obviously perspective changes things, and began to look a little harder at the society around me and what the future would hold for my children. Became just a little bit more active within the community. And when the opportunity was presented to join in the fight and become a representative for the people that I had grown up with and had seen some of the disparities that were happening around me, I prayed about it and talked to my husband and jumped in both feet.
So how did that opportunity come to you? What were you doing at the time, and how were you approached, or how did it come to you that you could actually become a Kentucky State Representative?
Well, I was recruited by the GOP caucus, and with the redistricting and some of the individuals in legislature, knowing my background within that area and my involvement in the community, reached out and asked if I would be interested, or if there was somebody that I knew that would be interested. But as I said, once I prayed about it and truly gave it some consideration and discussed it with my husband and saw where some doors were opening up and making it available, I've seen it as a wonderful opportunity, and where God's placed me at this time for a purpose.
Well, thank you for doing it. I mean, it's not all glitz and glamour. It just seems like a lot of hard work, time away from your family, and reading documents, trying to understand potential bills, and interacting with others over legislation. So, given the work side of it, and even the sacrifice, why do you think it's important that Christians get involved, Representative Callaway, in the kind of work that you're doing?
Well, I think it's really important to understand that we are participating whether we actively do so or not. So by not participating, we are affecting the system. So I think our biblical worldview has an opportunity to use its voice, and it should. So we as Christians who have a Lord and Savior and a biblical worldview that leads and guides our lives, want an opportunity to reflect that and defend that, and in some ways set a system up to reflect that and defend that. I think we're responsible as Christians to participate knowledgeably and educate ourselves and be very vocal, because our silence is loud as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Representative Callaway, you've become very interested in, for lack of a better term, the pro-life cause, protecting the rights of the unborn, speaking for the unborn. How did you become passionate about that issue? What brought you to that?
So it's always bothered me. Obviously, abortion is a sin. As I started to see, I guess, as the goalpost was being moved, as a pro-abortion movement was happening, how far they were moving it, how big of an atrocity they were willing to accept and call it a choice. I started seeing the videos about what an abortion actually looks like, what it involves, started reading the details about it. My spirit was stirred about it. The more that I got into it, there were so many it was rhetoric. It was, I think, intentional rhetoric was being pushed on us to whitewash what was happening. Abortion, and then, choice, we hear choice, and then, reproductive health. So there's this, I've just noticed this progression, and I've just taken a stand, there has to be a full stop. I mean, we've given the devil a foothold for so long that they've weaseled in and pushed a little more and pushed a little more. And I would say maybe they ran for 50, but they got 10 yards out of it. So I think that's where I became passionate. I started to see what was becoming more and more acceptable as we became kind of more and more passive about it, or agreeable about it in a lot of ways, unfortunately.
Representative Callaway, as a follower of Jesus and as a Kentucky Baptist, thank you for your willingness to get involved and be a voice, to stand and say not only is enough, but it's too much, and to push back. And I'm grateful for all of our elected leaders who have the position that you have, defending the unborn. During the 23 legislative session in the spring, you introduced what you called the Prenatal Equal Protection Act. Can you explain that bill, what the bill said, and what it would do if it were to become law?
Sure. So our current laws create an exception to our homicide laws. And what this bill does essentially is remove an exception and allow the judicial system to do its job. It looks at life that we profess as pro-lifers to be beginning at conception. It holds us accountable for that. If it is truly a life from conception, our 14th Amendment law, our 14th Amendment to the Constitution requires that legislation protect it equally, and that's what this bill does.
So just let me rephrase what I heard you say. The bill that you introduced was simple, and you've explained it in very simple terms. What I think I heard you saying was that our current homicide laws, laws about murder, have an exception for the unborn, and your desire was to just remove that exception, to treat the unborn as human beings who deserve rights, and then our homicide laws would apply to the unborn as well. Is that a kind of a fair restatement, or did I misstate in some way?
So the exception is for pregnant moms.
Okay.
So if a mother intentionally murders her baby, our law as it stands exempts all women for any reason they are capable of murdering their baby. Our fetal homicide laws have come a long way, as recognizing the fetus as a human being. But when we put the exemption in there, it's showing partiality to a certain group of people, and it's not giving equal justice to the life that's in the womb.
And Representative Callaway, I don't want to oversimplify, but it seems like that's probably where things get complicated for people, that if we're thinking about an unborn baby, should that unborn baby have rights? I think most folks would agree that the unborn baby should be treated as a human being. At least folks who have a pro-life or a biblical worldview would think that. So why do you think the bill failed to get the needed traction to move forward?
Well, we're pushing back against a lot of 50 years of hard work to convince us otherwise, to convince us that the mother is always a victim. We we have a mentality that a woman that is pursuing an abortion is a victim in every single case. And that's just not true anymore. It's not fair to assume that anymore. They majority of them who are in those situations are victimized in some way. Absolutely. But to give an exception to an entire group of individuals based on the fact that some of them are in situations where they've been deceived, they bought into lies they've been told. It's just not the way our laws are supposed to be set up. So I think that's one thing, a mentality that of just this of the victimhood. The second thing is possibly a lack in judicial system being able to make sure that the women would be properly protected. But we have to remember that our justice system starts with the presumption of innocence.
Right.
So, to say that we want to punish all women for having abortion, well, that's not true. We just want the judicial process to be equal for that child, and hold accountable those who need being held accountable. And it would fall on the state to prove that a crime had been committed. So the presumption of innocence, I think, is usually forgotten. But ultimately, the biggest pushback I got was the timing of it, which was understandable. The Supreme Court, our local Supreme Court, was considering their ruling at the time that I introduced the bill. There was a lot of fear that the judges and the justices in that case would see us as being too aggressive, and so would want to put a stop to our trigger law, which in some ways is understandable, but that's not the way our justice system works. They can't rule based on what a law that may have been a piece of legislation that was presented, a bill that was presented. Obviously they can't rule that way. But there was a lot of work that's been put in over the last few years by faithful Christians in legislation that have been fighting for these trigger laws. And there are a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on it involved in that, a lot on the line, which I absolutely understand and respected. And I struggled before filing this bill. It was a struggle that I had to absolutely surrender to the will of God and trust that this would not cause exactly what the fears that had been expressed, exactly that situation. And praise God, it didn't. God's faithful to those who are faithful. It provides for those who are obedient. And I've seen that throughout my whole life. So while I did struggle with this, and there was some legitimate concern and pushback, I think timing was a big one. Process is a big one. Just experienced politicians who are faithful believers express their concerns. Again, we prayed together about it. We came out on opposite sides some of the time, but there were a handful of co-sponsors that didn't end up showing up on the bill. There was a sort of bookkeeping error is what we're going to go with. And at the last minute, this was filed. There was a change that was made that the accurate bill didn't get filed. It was an older version.
I see.
So when I refiled, the co-sponsors were not on there. And I did not go around and ask them again because of some other things that had come up. I didn't pursue it. I said, you know what? I will stand alone on this. If it looks like I'm standing alone and I don't have any co-sponsors, then so be it. And so while I did have support, it was by no means majority, but there was support within the caucus, but it didn't go anywhere.
And Representative Callaway, thank you for just the way you've honored your friends in the legislature. That there are lots of committed believers there who who want to make law to promote human flourishing. Man, that's their heart's desire. These are members of church. Some are pastors, some are deacons, some are just like you, sing the choir and have been treasurer for their local association. These are just folks that love the Lord and really have answered a call to do this work. And it's not easy work, and there's a lot of back and forth, and I'm sure tempers could even flare in some settings. But thank you for the generous way in which you've honored your fellow legislators. So some have expressed, and you've addressed this, but I want to see if there's anything else you want to say. Some have expressed reservations about the bill, have said that they were concerned it would result in some women who have abortions being charged as criminals. And is that fair? Is kind of the question, and is that direction? What I think I hear you saying, that's really not what the bill's about. The bill's really about just affording the same protections to unborn children that are afforded to the rest of us. Is that a fair understanding of the bill? And then it sounds like in a case of a person who selects to have an abortion, that they would be given the presumption of innocence, and would be, if they were under coercion, that would be addressed through the legal justice process. If they were forced to do something they didn't want to do, that would come out as well. Anything else you want to add on that question?
No, I think you're right. It is the presumption of innocence. It would not be retroactive, so it would not go after women who have aborted their babies in the past. We're very clear about accidental or natural deaths. The ectopic pregnancies, we've been very clear about that. So in fact, this actually protects a lot of the women who right now could be being trafficked and then forced into having an abortion, and it's legal for her to do that. And so there cannot be a coercion charge because it is a legal act. So by putting this in effect, this will protect the woman from having to go through that. She can actually, it will be, the charges will fall to the appropriate individual through the judicial process.
So will you file the bill again next year? And if so, do you see any changes to the bill coming? Have you thought that far ahead?
Oh, well, I think about it often. I won't say all the time because
Sure.
there are so many things happening, but I do think about it often. And I'm struggling to discern whether God wants me to pursue it as is. I'm still looking to have some good conversations with some of my colleagues about it to see if there's any way that we can compromise, that we can work out some of the unknowns and the details. But I feel like it is such a simple bill that I think some of it's going to be heart changes. It's going to be rhetoric change, and not letting groups dictate legislation, I think, is what it comes down to. The legislators to really personally and for their constituents who are pregnant, and you have to really consider those things, and not necessarily a movement one way or another, a group. So I think I've left it open to God's direction as always, and I'll just continue to pray about it and reach out to colleagues as the doors open.
Thank you for that. Representative Callaway, it's expected that there could be legislations that would add exceptions to our current laws, such as rape and incest. I think I know the answer here, but I'll ask the question anyway. Would you support such a bill, and then why or why not?
I would not, because exceptions continue to show partiality. It's based on how an individual was conceived. It's based on a location of an individual. It undermines the value of life that we have declared we believe is from the point of conception. And to say anything other, to say any exception to that, or to give any partiality, is unbiblical. And I don't think we're in a place to do that. I think we are supposed to be honoring life, standing up for life, defending life, and reaching out to those who are suffering in those situations and explain to them that there are options, and one of them shouldn't be ending another life. And again, just the equal protection in our laws. I think we have to stand on it.
Representative Callaway, one of the issues in our state is companies mailing abortion drugs into the state and abortion happening that way. Do you believe anything can be done on a state level to prevent companies from sending those drugs into the state for chemical abortions, which are still occurring in Kentucky?
Oh, they absolutely are. Mail is tricky because of the Comstock Act. So if the sender lacks the intent that the recipient is going to use the object unlawfully, then then it's not prohibited. So federal law, it doesn't prohibit the abortion drugs. FDA's declared them safe. That's a whole nother discussion. Right. But as it stands, there's not a whole lot we can do that I'm aware of. I would love to hear some options, but as far as I've heard and seen from just some of the struggles other states, our hands are a little bit tied right now. Well, so again, instead of going after the industry, we go after the actors.
It seems like your legislation would address that issue as well, as it protects the unborn child. Do you anticipate
Absolutely.
Any other pro-life legislation coming in 2024? Anything that you're hearing that you might share with us?
So there have been there's been at least a caucus meeting that I've had to miss. We've got one coming up. So I hate to say it, but I'm not up to date. I haven't heard it. If there is any, I haven't been approached about any. So I plan to attend the next one coming up and hopefully get caught up to date, see what kind of discussions we're having.
Well, just shifting gears, so I introduced you as a previous diesel mechanic, and you want to go ahead and affirm that did in fact happen, that you did work on diesel engines at one season in your life.
Well, I was more tearing them down and putting them together to make cores. I didn't have to actually make them run. Okay. I worked on calibrating parts of them, but I thoroughly enjoyed turning wrenches and getting dirty. My husband we've even done a engine swap, and so I still like to turn wrenches occasionally when I can get my hands dirty.
That's great. That's great experience. Representative Callaway, beyond abortion, what are your other legislative priorities for 2024? What would you love to see happen? I know this is a budget year, and that takes a lot of your time and energy.
So mentioning budget, we'll just start off with that. There are some roads that need attention, intersections that I've heard from constituents that we need to address. One big project that I'm diving into, I'm kind of picking up where somebody else had started, but I'm looking for an interchange within our community that would relieve some of the pressure. We've got UPS, is big in our area. We have CSX, and some of those locations are right within our neighborhood, and so I'd like to see an interchange for one of our interstates through here, one of our freeways. So that's a big one as far as budget. But really, crime within the community has risen just exponentially over the last few years. So I'm addressing carjacking. I've got a bill. It's part of an omnibus bill that the other 6 GOP members within the Louisville legislature we're working on together. So I'm pretty excited about that one. I think that's going to send a clear message that the criminals are not winning, that we are pushing back. And then also simultaneously, I'm working on a bill that would reduce recidivism by reducing some barriers for some convicted felons of nonviolent crimes. We're going to see what we can do about licensing and getting them into some careers, get them just reducing barriers so that they can be a part of society. And then there's some veterans concerns that I've heard, their service animals, some housing opportunities. So I'm staying busy.
Well, you're and good, all are good, important causes. Folks who live in Jefferson County are obviously pretty well aware of the challenges that our school system has had this year. The Jefferson County public school and the busing situation. Any chance that that may be addressed from Frankfurt?
That one is a big one too. That should have come right after the crime one. Actually, it just escaped me. But yes, absolutely. So as of right now, we are addressing. We've actually met with the auditor and just requested that JCPS be looked at. And we're looking at finances, we're looking at safety, and we're looking at productivity, not academic levels, what we're producing, how the kids are learning. And so all of those are going to be reviewed, and then we'll act appropriately, what that looks like. But we are absolutely following this one down the line, holding feet to the fire, because this is something that we cannot just overlook and excuse. There's just too much damage happening to our kids, and it's time that we hold people accountable and make good changes for our communities.
Here in Kentucky, we have an important governor's race coming up in November. What do you think Kentucky Baptists should be thinking about and praying about before we go into the voting booth?
Well, right now we have a governor who is absolutely okay with abortions up until birth. There's no kind of restrictions. There's no value of life there. There's no value of family. We've seen, there's no value of for small businesses. We saw that they were deemed non-essentials. A lot of those did not recover from that. We've seen closing churches. That alone should be a red flag for Christians. That a professed deacon, and that I would challenge. Just because an individual quotes the Bible and claims the title does not mean that they are walking biblically. So I would just tell people to look at the individuals, the fruit that an individual produces, and vote appropriately. We have a candidate who has shown value for life, who did go to fight for us. When the businesses were closed, when the churches were closed, we had somebody that did push back, who has shown that they can be a voice that we're hearing within the communities. And I think we need to prayerfully consider that and vote appropriately. Be vocal about it. Be vocal about the fact that the standing governor vetoed a bill that we presented that would prohibit the mutilation of children. So putting a under 18 child through a surgery that would make them infertile, that would remove healthy body parts. He vetoed that. So I think that's pretty powerful, and I think people that's something that as I knock doors, that I'm out in the community, that I can cross the aisle about and get a good response. That yes, I don't accept that. And so I think if we talk to our neighbors about those kind of topics, that we can be effective, and then get to the polls. Make sure, help a neighbor get there if necessary. Take off work as necessary. It's allowed. Let's get to the polls and let our voices be heard. Because, like I said when we started out, silence is louder sometimes than words. So we need to use the voices we've been given.
So you had your first year as a freshman legislator. What are some lessons that you learned that will help you as you go into next season, Representative Callaway?
I think I've learned that communication is key. I think being active, making phone calls, office visits, reaching out. There's so many people here to help. There's so many organizations in place to help. I think communication is key. Mutual respect is key. I've learned that honesty can be tested, and I have to always stand on my values and principles, stand up for the people that I represent, even if it goes against something that, even my caucus would like to see happen. So you compromise where you compromise, but you stand firm where you have to stand firm. So those are some of the lessons, and just ultimately trust God and have faith that He's walking right here with me.
Representative Callaway, thank you for your service to your family, to your church that you're part of, and also to our state. Thank you for representing us in Frankfurt, and thank you for taking the time to let's have this conversation on leadership lessons.
I really appreciate the opportunity, the platform. I appreciate the work that you all do coming alongside churches, and you are in our prayers and our contributions. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing and this opportunity to just hash this out.
Thank you.
Thanks.